Hello, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Third Rail Podcast. I'm Adam, joined by Owen, and we have a pretty fun episode, at least fun in my opinion, coming your
Yeah.
way. I've been looking forward to doing this all day, and it's a little bit of a unique style, but we're hoping this can build some good debate and discussion. But before we dive on in, how are you doing, Owen?
I'm good, Adam. How are you?
I'm doing well, and hopefully, we don't want to slit each other's throats after this episode
Let's hope.
because this will probably be the most contentious episode yet. The main topic is going to be hot takes in public transit. So, the way we structure this, each of us came up with some hot transit takes. We're going to go back and forth, pitching it to the other, and then maybe debating and pushing back on that. And I promise to the listeners, none of this is scripted. This is all first time hearing it. So when I tell Owen my hot take, he has not heard it before. And when Owen
I for the record, I
his
don't
to
even know what
mine,
mine are yet. I've got a few ideas floating around, but I need to hear where you go with this to decide what level of craziness to
how
choose.
spicy of a hot take you
Yeah,
have.
exactly. How outlandish.
Yeah. So I guess I'll go first then.
All right.
And I knowing you, we've kind of talked about this, so I know it's already going to be a spicy one.
Oh boy.
But I'll just put it out there. I don't think rail lines in highway medians are bad. And in fact, I think highway median rail lines could be pretty good in many circumstances.
Okay. You know what I'm gonna say. I don't want to disappoint you because I think you were expecting me to really to go off on that one. There is nuance there, and so
Let me give my justification.
Yeah.
And then we could dive on in this. But I was expecting you to be up in arms. I'm a little surprised at how composed you were.
I know
about
I didn't
that.
mean to disappoint you. I'm sorry.
I know. I guess the listeners aren't getting the spicy Stephen A. Smith takedown that they were maybe expecting.
That's okay.
But here's my thoughts. Here's my thoughts on the highway median. First of all, the main point is I think even opponents of highway median trains would concede, and that's the cost. Highway medians are often set aside either directly or indirectly for public transit. Sometimes that could be HOV, sometimes that could be bus lanes, sometimes that is rail transit that is built at the same time or built later. And you already have the right of way in place.
Yeah.
And not only that is it's it varies, but most highways, especially expressways, interstates, they're grade separated. So they have bridges or tunnels over any crossing roads. So you could build some very high caliber public transit that is grade separated and doesn't have to stop very often or at all in the median of a highway that had already been set aside. So you don't need to build new viaducts. You don't need to dig expensive subway tunnels. You don't need to pay the expenses. Obviously, laying the track and building the stations is still a cost. But compared to pretty much anything else on a per mile basis, that's about as cheap as you could go, both in terms of like acquisition of the land and once the land is acquired, it's basically just lay down the tracks and get moving. So that's my first thought. And that's, I
Okay.
think even opponents of highway median lines, rail lines would concede that that is a thing. But they might argue, there's still downsides to it.
Mm-hmm.
But listen up. I think maybe those downsides could actually be beneficial. So some people might say, highways are loud and uninviting and no one wants to be
Don't
by
take my
it.
criticisms away from me here, man. That's
I
number
know.
one.
Yeah, but many people who live in this country say the same thing about rail lines. And obviously, if you could dig underground, that could slow down some of those criticisms, although not prevent it entirely. You see example after example across the country of residents complaining about vents and noise and whatnot, even when it's underground. But you're right that it is loud. But if you could put the trains in an already loud and noisy and chaotic right of way, you're not making it any worse. You're almost erasing that criticism when building the line. It's like, oh yeah, you might say trains are loud and uninviting. We already have this highway here, so if we just add it to that, it can't be any worse. So that's point number one. Point number two is that highways could often be scars through communities. They are canyons of sorts separating communities. To me, that is almost a benefit of having the train in the median, because say you built it on one side or another of a highway, the highway essentially acts as a fortress, a wall, preventing people from crossing. But if you build it in the median, you could have entrances on both sides, serving both sides of both communities on either side of the highway. And it's able to do that. It's almost serving as a bridge and helping connect these communities either with transit, one stop serving both sides, or sometimes you see this with the Silver Line in DC, you see this in some places in Chicago. The entrance to the station could serve as a pedestrian bridge across the highway. Mm-hmm. So in a place with poor connectivity otherwise, this transit could come in and save it. And then the last point, I know you'll push back on this, so I'm already bracing myself for that. But I think having it in the median of a highway, it sends you out to the suburbs very quickly, directly. And then at the end of the line, you could have a nice big park and ride. You could have a big lot or big garage or structure, and you could almost sync up any transit demand from further on in that highway. And you can't get any closer to the highway than literally in the median. So you see all over the country, but I'm most familiar with DC and Denver, and they have this where the terminus station has direct entrances and exits to the parking lot from the highway. Mm-hmm. And you could just go from points beyond, and you could drive to the end of the line and get on and park quickly and get on the train, and in the evening take the train to the end of the line, get in her car, and then drive away. So I don't know. That's my possibly hot take of why highway median transit is not only not a negative, but in many cases could be a positive.
Okay. I don't hate what you said as much as I thought I was going to. We'll cut this from the podcast if you don't want me to share this. Adam texted me like 3 days ago. I don't think biking is an effective supplement to a transit system. Like, I thought you were going to lead with something like that.
Maybe the next episode we'll have to dive into that.
Yeah, we had a good debate there. Sorry for airing out your business, Adam. But
oh no, it's all good.
We're not as far apart on this issue as I think you might assume, but there are a few things I want to call out in just the assumptions that are made. Like, we're assuming you're coming into this with the assumption that the highway already exists. That is fine. Highway median transit is much better than no transit in a pre-existing highway. And as we know, many pre-existing urban highways cut through black or neighborhoods of color, and those scars are still visible in the urban fabric of these cities. So you're right that damage was done. And so in the places where that irreparable damage was done, because you could dig up the highway, but you can't undo the past 60 years of that slice through the city. Yeah, it's better to have transit in the freeway median than to have it not exist at all. We are aligned on that. I don't hate the park and ride argument either. I think that transit systems around the country might prioritize suburban commuters a little bit more than they maybe should, especially post-COVID, as we've seen more people shift to irregular commute times. Commuting patterns have changed since COVID, so I'm not sure the park and ride model is as strong as it once was, where you mentioned the DC Metro. There were a lot of people coming in from 30 minutes away from the last metro stop, parking and taking the train into DC to avoid paying a lot for parking or sitting in traffic. I'm not sure those circumstances are nearly as strong as they used to be in many American cities. Remote work and some offices going fully virtual, hybrid, or moving out of cities altogether have lessened some of the issues with the 9 to 5. So I don't hate the park and ride. I'm just not sure if all park and rides are that necessary. But when it comes down to it, it really is an unpleasant ride. This is the real reason I hate highway median transit, is that when I am standing in a highway median waiting for a train, in terms of rapid rail transit, I don't think there's ever a time I feel more like a second-class citizen compared to those driving. There's nothing quite like a 10-minute wait for a train in a highway median in lousy weather, as people in their single occupancy vehicles cruise past you. You know, there's no traffic. You are not at the same level of those people on the highway. You are having a worse experience. I pulled up a fact. This is for people who live, so spend hours upon hours a day by the highway. If you live within 164 feet of a highway, your risk of sudden cardiac death increases by 38%. This is the American Heart Association. That is an astounding number. And so if you're living close to a freeway and then you have to get even closer by getting into the median to take the train, if headways aren't good and you're standing on that platform for, let's say anywhere between 4 to 15 minutes, that's a lot of exposure to particulates in the air. So that boarding experience is far and away my least favorite aspect of highway median transit. I have taken the CTA Blue Line in the median of the Kennedy Expressway. I've taken the CTA Red Line in the median of the Dan Ryan Expressway, both in Chicago. And while I'm glad those lines exist compared to not existing, it's a poor riding experience. And there's no other way to put it. That's my argument against it. I think transit riders deserve better. I would be far more amenable to the idea of highway median transit if there were actual stations where riders were protected better from the elements, but more importantly, the noise of the highway, and even more importantly, the pollutants. If you could wall it, make it quieter, more pleasant. Perception is really important in transit. We want to capture those choice riders. Choice riders aren't the only people you should tailor the service to, but any rides you can capture on the fringes is useful for the whole system, and a more pleasant experience would be more pleasant for everyone, those who rely on the system and those who don't have to. And so I just think highway median transit is the lowest form of urban rail service, and I think riders deserve better.
Yeah, I think those are valid points about the conditions. I think there's ways to mitigate it, as you alluded to. You did concede that. But I don't know. I'm looking at parts of the Silver Line. I see like stations like Reston, Wheelie Reston East or Innovation Center or whatever. Those are built in highway medians, and they're spurring some really great communities around it on both sides of the highway that previously didn't exist. And in the absence of that highway, I don't know if the train would get that far out. So it's getting communities way further out than possibly would be covered otherwise. But I don't know.
It's not a terrible, you're not wrong. It's better than nothing. I think highway median is the lowest common denominator. And I'm looking at photos of the station. This is a pretty good looking station, all things considered. This is a new build. This station opened in 2014. A lot of highway median transit is from the 60s, 70s, 80s, at a time when we weren't spending as much money on transit. As I do every time I mention money, we need to have a conversation about how to get costs down. But the answer isn't a bare bones station in the middle of a freeway with like barely any sound protection, no protection from the pollutants from the cars. I think the Silver Line is actually an example of highway median transit done pretty well, Adam. Being new build, in that the freeway really allowed for that train to extend as far as it did. You're right. I just think that typically across the country, when you look at highway median transit, especially from a rail perspective, highway median or highway bus service is tougher because the bus has to go down the highway. Like, unless, I guess you could build a bus guideway, but at that point you might as well just build rail. I can kind of understand the argument. Like, we talked about the bus service by you out in Colorado. That bus exists because the highway exists. You know, it could just operate on the highway. I guess I can appreciate that a little bit more than I appreciate highway median rail. But yeah, still, especially for older builds, they can be a pretty tough experience when you have a long time to wait.
Yeah, so that was hot take number 1. Let us know down in the comments how spicy you think that is, from mashed peas all the way to Carolina Reaper. Give us a take there. But how about you lead us off with hot take number 2, Owen? I know you were mulling on a couple ideas, but I'm
going to give a take that I don't think is very consequential in the transit community. I'll be interested where you fall on this, because I am thinking about our broader transportation system in the United States. And I think a lot about the cost to build things. I think a lot about the public perception of costs. And I have kind of come to believe that in order to have a better transit system, we need to make hidden costs visible. So my take is that funding for highways should be paid entirely based on automated tolling. And there should be toll gantries every few miles, and you pay the exact cost to build and maintain that road. So it could be variable based on how many people are driving, but I would support getting rid of the gas tax and getting rid of federal funding for highways, and requiring that highways and their forthcoming maintenance be paid entirely by the road's users, so that we could uncover the high costs of highway transportation.
Okay, I think this is indeterminate spice level at the moment. I'm going to probe a little deeper and get some clarification. I guess question number 1, in your vision, does the price vary like time of day based on like busyness of the road, kind of like the New York congestion pricing, or is it just a fixed toll?
That's actually really hard to say, because I could see arguments in either direction. I could just choose one here, but I want to act as if this is a serious policy proposal, and I would say I don't know. I think if you set the toll the same all day, it shows what the cost is of the road, because the road is going to cost what it costs, right?
Yeah.
But if you
guess from an econ perspective, if you have a fixed cost like that, you're almost recouping the costs of the road. That's how you're doing it. The road depreciates over a certain time, and you're just dividing that out per network user.
Yep.
If it's a time of use, that is almost pricing the externality of you using it when it's most busy. So I guess that's more of a philosophical approach of how do you wish to treat this tax, this toll.
This is why I didn't give an answer, because there are a ton of externalities of driving, but I don't actually care about what happens on highways. I'm a transit user. So outside of buses getting delayed in traffic, but I think the answer to that is bus lanes. I don't really care what happens on highways. I talk with my friends because I drive the speed limit when I drive. At least I try to. I know everyone gets away from that sometimes, but I care deeply about how my friends drive on local roads where there might be pedestrians or cyclists. Highways, I don't really care. I don't care if there's traffic. I don't care if there's not traffic. I would say whatever functions better. My goal is to uncover the cost of that highway. The externality of dynamic pricing, yeah, you could charge people for the congestion that they cause. That pricing might actually make the highway a better choice. If you charged more to drive during rush hour and dissuaded people from driving, it might make the highway faster, which isn't necessarily a goal of mine. I don't. Again, I just want to uncover the costs.
There's been studies. The congestion pricing has been about 1.5 years in New York, and it's been very popular with pretty much everyone at this point.
Yeah.
It's popular with people who don't drive because it helps fund transit and it makes the roads less busy. But people who do drive say, I'm paying $9 or whatever, and I'm getting to my destination in half the time. They're like, this is the best idea ever. So it's, depending on how it's set up, it could be a win-win. My next question for you is...
I want to just pop in really quickly.
Go ahead.
I love congestion pricing for a choice rider too. I think it's such a win-win with how transit-rich New York City is that if you live in a suburb and you have a car, you can take the train 80% of the time and then pay the toll and fly to work down a highway that isn't congested the way it used to be. I think that's a great policy. I love the idea that I'm going to pay a little bit extra for the lack of traffic. Unrelated to this.
Yeah, it's a lot of economists really like congestion pricing.
Oh, I love it.
Because it does a very good job of aligning costs with benefits. But my next question would be is how tailored is it to the individual user? Is it a flat fare, or if you have HOV, do you get a discount? If you have a heavier vehicle, do you pay more? I'm just curious. I don't know if you would have thought about this either.
I have thought about this because I say this to my friends. I have a lot of friends who don't see any issue with our transportation system, and yeah, I'm annoying as hell when I try to point out every hidden subsidized cost that make the highways better and more cheaper than they actually are. And again, the answer to this question is it depends on what your goal is. In uncovering the costs, the maintenance costs of a highway are really driven by the amount of trucks using it. Cars do a menial amount of damage to the road compared to 18-wheelers. Rhode Island was actually pretty innovative in that they put up toll gantries and started charging tolls exclusively for trucks. That has been fought in the courts. The American Association of Truckers has been going at it since 2016. Right now, the law has been struck down. It's being appealed again by the state. It may work its way all the way to the Supreme Court. So yeah, if you want to really show the cost of the road, you toll trucks at a much higher rate. That will make goods more expensive for everyone. We do subsidize the transport of goods. Of course, we don't subsidize the freight railroads. So should trucking get more expensive, does some of that shift back to rail? Does some of the modality move back? It's hard to say. But yeah, I would support tying the Easy Pass to the car. People are going to say, oh, here's a communist, wants to know everything about me, wants to track my movement. No, but you have to register a car to drive. Driving is not one of your God-granted freedoms in our country. So you got to register your car, and I think your license plate should have an Easy Pass built into it and a transponder. So yes, we know how, or we being the government knows how many axles you have, so they can charge you accordingly. Because the externalities here, there are so many negative externalities of driving a bigger car. A bigger bumper kills more pedestrians. A bigger car uses more gasoline to travel and therefore pollutes our environment more. Anything that can get people to drive less and shrink the size of their cars, which this would do based on just general economics, is a win to me.
I think even from a infrastructure costs, a heavier car does an exponential amount of more damage onto the asphalt.
Yeah, it's
than
each
a lighter
additional
vehicle.
axle, right?
I think it's by pound. Even if you
it?
have like a
Okay.
light truck versus like a sedan or like an F1 or whatever, because you're putting more weight on the asphalt. And I'm not a physicist, so I don't know the specific breakdown, but my understanding from reading some literature is that it's roughly proportional to the weight to the fourth power.
Yeah.
So
That sounds
sometimes that's an argument against buses, where buses are actually very heavy, unsurprisingly, and they do a lot of damage. Even if you account per passenger, it sometimes doesn't pencil out. And that's just
That's a maintenance, though. Buses are
Yeah.
such a better, more efficient use of road space.
You're right. But in terms of, that's why you'll see at bus stops,
Oh, the
like
big,
where
big
buses
divots. Yeah.
stay, either big divots or when cities are smart, it won't be asphalt. It'll be like concrete, where buses have layovers or might stop or whatever. I guess my last question here. This was I'd say it's probably a jalapeno level spicy, not quite a Carolina Reaper, but
Okay.
pretty spicy there. Where does the money go? Does it go back to funding new highways? Does it go to the general fund? Does it go to the highway trust fund? Does it go to transit? I think I know what you'd say, but in your dream policy, where would this money end up?
This is a great question. Yeah. In the dream policy, it probably does fund other modes to make up for the negative externalities of highways and just the costs that driving places on communities at large. But in the slightly more reasonable, I again, if I ran on this platform, I think I would receive negative votes because Americans love to drive. And
Hey, you'd win in Seattle. You'd win in parts of San Francisco.
But in the pragmatic version of this, I would say that for pre-existing highways, these tolls would pay for the exact cost to maintain or upgrade that road. You want to build a new interchange? We are going to charge the users of the road exactly what it costs. And then it can go back into it. I am probably one of the few people in this country who doesn't mind privatized highway infrastructure. The Chicago Skyway is an example of privatized highway infrastructure. It costs a ton to drive that road. And that is because you're not only giving a little bit of a profit to the owners of the infrastructure, who, by the way, didn't pay to build it. They just paid to buy it from the public. But you're also paying to maintain that road. They're in charge of the maintenance, and that is a big part of the cost in the toll. And I think if more highways were like that, it would have the positive externalities of reducing driving, therefore reducing emissions, reducing wear on the road by encouraging people to use smaller cars. And then something I haven't mentioned yet is if you charge for vehicle miles traveled, which is what I'm proposing here, a set charge for every mile or so of travel, it will encourage people to live closer to where they work, which ideally means living closer to that urban core, which makes public transit more accessible.
Well, not only that, at the margins, if you live in the suburbs and you could either drive the whole way or drive to a park and ride and take the train in, this would push at least some people to take and train. And it might push people to carpool. It might push people to live closer to work. It might push people to work from home. I don't know. There's a lot of second order effects.
If you want to really flesh this out, I would say I'd support voucher programs for people who park and ride where they don't pay as much for the drive to the park and ride, like subsidizing the cost of getting to transportate to public.
Don't we kind of do that though? Like trains are subsidized in every American city. Park and ride parking is subsidized in every American
That's
city
true.
too.
That is, yeah, you're not wrong. But But so are highways. Parking is subsidized in every American city. New York City passed congestion pricing, but there's still billions of dollars being left on the table yearly because street parking is free in the world's greatest city, the country's biggest city. It's mind-boggling. So
you're going to hate my next hot take then.
Oh, boy. Yeah,
we're doing two hot takes.
Well,
so.
I don't, did you think that was a hot take from me? That's a hot take to someone who has to drive everywhere for sure.
I don't. I think it would be very different. And I could see someone who does drive as saying the community got together and agreed that this is something we need. We don't ask pedestrians to pay for sidewalks. We don't ask people who go to the library to pay for library service. We don't ask people who use parks to pay for the parks, at least in most cases. That's a choice that the community came to for highways. And they might say too, I'm paying for gas, and depending on the state, anywhere from 23 to 67 cents of the gasoline, of a gallon of gasoline, goes to the state and federal governments to fund roadway construction and maintenance. So I could see them making an argument too. It's like, we kind of already do this. And you could maybe make an argument.
You and I both know that the gas tax only covers a fourth of highway funding in the U.S.
Yeah, it goes into the trust fund, but there's you get infrastructures paid for at the community level and the state and national level for all types of infrastructure too. So I don't know. That would be my counter argument. I'm an economist. I said this earlier. I like matching costs with benefits as closely as you possibly can. I don't think costs should be socialized. I think it should be at the point of agency. And in this case, you'd be doing that. You'd be paying directly on a per mile basis and potentially, depending on your policy, on a per pound basis of your car, which I think that could be pretty unique actually.
Yeah,
in that case, I like it, but I could see pushback.
Yeah, the one pushback I'll give to your hypothetical pushback, because I think we're pretty aligned here, is that it's more about the negative externalities of driving rather than the costs itself. Like I led with the goal is to uncover the high cost of driving, literally the high cost of roadway maintenance, but that's not why I want to reduce driving. The cost of highway maintenance is at the bottom of the list for me. It's the emissions. It's the thousands upon thousands of Americans that die each year because we choose to live our life this way. These are avoidable deaths that we accept as unavoidable. People talk about driving deaths the way they talk about cancer, as if it is a part of life. And that will forever drive me crazy because we could choose to save these lives, whereas we don't have a cure for cancer yet. So no one dies because they walk on the sidewalk, right? My act of walking on the sidewalk, yeah, I'm not getting charged for each step I take on that asphalt. That asphalt, by the way, which is far more cracked somehow than the road just to the left of it. But anyways, it's about the externalities. I'm excited to hear your take.
Okay, yeah. So that's each of us has one hot take. I think we agreed to do two, so
yeah.
Here, this will be my final one, and this might even be spicier than my first one. I am not opposed to free neighborhood parking in a lot of cities. Yeah, okay, that got the reaction I was expecting out of that first one, but hear me out. Here's my justification. I think that you have a lot of communities that are urban areas that would do well to have denser housing, whether that's a duplex, whether that's a quadplex, whether that's row housing, town housing, whatever, rather than suburban separated single family homes.
Okay.
And I feel like for many middle class Americans, one of the biggest hangups of moving to that lifestyle, they like so much about it. They like the sense of community. They like the proximity to corner stores and shops and other amenities and parks that are much more difficult in a cul-de-sac community. But the one hiccup is, in a lot of those, it doesn't come with off-street parking. That's just the nature. If you have a row house, there might not be room for a garage. If you have a duplex, a lot of duplexes can't fit garages in there. I think having free city parking is something that the city could do to help encourage families, middle-class families, especially with younger kids who might need to go to daycare, go to ballet practice, go to school projects, go to the grocery or little league or whatever, to live in these types of communities that they might otherwise want to, but there's this pretty big red line which they just need access to a car for those types of trips.
Okay. A very well thought out take, and a lot of the small points you make in there are right. You know, I was actually just having this conversation because I'm unbearable and have no other interests. But my issue with this, Adam, is I would put you in the 1% of Americans who really do think about the transportation system. And you know, your lived experience does involve driving a car. You have a car right now. It's very useful to you. And so if I have this conversation with someone like my mom, she says the exact same thing. And she's right. I have no idea how hard it is to be a mother in a city and try to meet your obligations to everyone, your children, friends. Like a car unlocks that lifestyle for you. And unfortunately, that's the way it is right now. But I want to challenge the underlying assumption that it's the car that is necessary to unlock that life. You're right. This is one solution to make it easier for families to live in a city. But why is it that way? Well, the public transit isn't good enough, or there's too much sprawl, or an employer is located out in the suburbs. These are the fundamental problems in our American society that drive us to the automobile, where I totally appreciate your solution. It might be a stopgap. It's certainly necessary in some cases, but neighborhood parking is a symptom of a broader problem, and it's certainly not a solution in my book. I think there are massive issues that will take generations to solve, but adding parking in a neighborhood doesn't solve these problems. Density, true density, like European style. Madrid is a perfect example where you can walk in the, let me say it because, you know, I'm already a communist here, the 15-minute city, dangerous, where you can get everything you need, including an education, within a 15-minute walk of where you live. That is what true freedom looks like. So I can't argue with you because, you know, I've lived, admittedly, I've never lived west of the Mississippi, but I've lived in the state of Michigan, Rhode Island, and now Illinois. I've seen what our cities look like, and I agree. You need a car in many places to live a life with a family. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't push for better. And that certainly doesn't mean we should further subsidize the car lifestyle by adding parking.
Yeah,
or making it free.
Yeah, my counter argument would be you could maybe include that in property taxes. You could say per house you get up to 2 parking permits per property, and that's baked into the property tax. But property tax, it covers lots of things at the local level. It covers public education. It covers trash pickup in many cases. I see this as just another thing that communities could do, especially young families. You have a lot of people who, when they're single or when they are newly married or in a relationship without children, they love living in dense communities, whether that's an apartment complex, whether that's a townhouse, whether that's a condo, a duplex, with all these city amenities. But then they have kids, and I think if you ask many of them, I would bet a strong amount of money that I don't have the numbers, and I haven't asked people, that the main factor is that you grew up, your parents had 4 kids, that's right?
Yes,
and 3
I have
others.
3 younger brothers.
So 3 younger brothers. I grew up, it was me and my twin brother, who I guess younger brother as well.
By how long?
I can't, 12 minutes, the
Nice.
best 12 minutes of my life. I know, but I can't imagine. And I grew up in one of those neighborhoods. Maybe I'm biased based on my lived experience.
I love the area you grew up in.
I grew up in a neighborhood with pretty high density. It's not, there's a couple of apartment buildings, but for the most part, it's just row houses from street to street and maybe an alley in between. And a couple of the houses might have a spot from the alley, but for the most part, that whole neighborhood has no off street parking. And I cannot imagine families with young children choosing to live there if they didn't have access to that on-street parking. And I bet many families would even pay for it, even pay upwards of a couple hundred to $1,000 a year for access to a spot. But even things like going to, what, you have a family of 6, if you have husband, wife, and then 4 kids, you're going to Costco once a week. You're going to get groceries. You can't do that on an e-bike. If you're going to the kid gets the flu, need to take him to the doctor's office, you can't do that on an e-bike. Kid has a travel baseball practice, you can't do that walking and bus necessarily. I think that is something that is a great and easy way to get these families to stick in good communities rather than go all the way to Chevy Chase, Maryland, Langley, Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia, and get a single family home with a driveway where they could park. And if that's the 2 alternatives, I know what I'm choosing 100 times out of 100.
Oh, for sure. What I'm challenging here is, why are those the only alternatives? It is a tragedy that it's cheaper.
That's it. Yeah.
It's a tragedy that it's cheaper to live in a suburb than it is a city, and that is something that we.
I don't
over
even
the
think
course
it's
of our
cheaper.
Lifetime, oh, it is.
I think
it
it's
is.
just more convenient. I think a lot of people would like the convenience of having a driveway like that where they could park their cars off the street.
I think
we could.
If you're living the life you described, Costco once a week, travel baseball, your life is cheaper in a suburb. If you want a bigger house, you move away from the density, and that I kind of understand. There is more space the farther out you go. But this gets back again to the highway discussion we were having. Our economics are rigged to hide these high costs of suburban living. In most cases, I do think it is cheaper for an American family, a young American family, to live in the suburbs. Free storage for your car in your driveway, your house. It's been essentially a guarantee over the past 40 years that it will appreciate in value, despite a few dips during economic hardship. The suburbs have been a pretty good bet for an American family. And I grew up in the suburbs for many of the same reasons. The schools are a whole nother issue where typically, if your goal is to send your kids to the best school you can, which is a very understandable thing, most parents want to. In a city, your choice is often, if you aren't happy with the city schools, and let's not pretend like American education is perfect. Urban education is often worse than suburban. It's either private school, which you can't afford, or moving to the suburbs which you can. That's a choice that many people make. I just want to challenge the underlying assumptions about American life, because you're right. Like, one day, I hope I have my own children, and I'm sure I'll need a car to get them everywhere they need to be. But I don't want there to be free parking. I don't want to subsidize that lifestyle for people. And I think the lifestyle you described was actually quite car-centric. We just don't really think about it. Like, I would argue that travel sports is, in a way, a creation of our car culture. We have slowly grown more and more comfortable with driving farther and farther for youth sports competitions. That's ridiculous, for one. None of these kids are going to be playing in the majors. Everyone should play in their local town league, which we have slowly ripped apart as people are fine driving farther and farther. Costco is a great business. I love Costco. But, I actually biked to Costco earlier this week. I bought one shirt and a hot dog. I biked there. I biked back. I took the bus there 2 weeks ago. It's awesome. But I don't have a car, and Costco isn't designed to serve people without a car. I think Costco is a very car-centric business where buying in bulk is just something that is oriented around the automobile. As packages and things have gotten larger, I think you can look at American history, and it's a lot more than the car, but in the 1900s, very early 1900s, people would buy more frequently smaller portions, in part because oftentimes they were walking to and from the grocery store. So I do want to challenge these underlying assumptions. One other thing I want to bring up, you mentioned permit parking. I hate permit parking. I think there is an entitlement of sorts to assume that the public street is there only for the people who live on it to store their car. I live about 1.5 miles from Wrigley Field, so in my neighborhood, you are not allowed to park on the street during a Cubs game unless you have a neighborhood permit. Why? Why am I the only person allowed to park here? Why not someone who lives in the city, pays the same property taxes, and if they have a car, they can't drive over here? I think permit parking is this crazy dystopian form of controlling the street in this public space, which I don't even think should have parking in the first place. But if it's going to exist, it should be for everyone. And instead, this is yet another means of control. People want to build new housing. Neighbors say, what about the permits? We're already at capacity. Parking is the root of half of the problems I can think of in American society. I'm done. Rant over.
Okay, so how spicy would you rank that? What type of pepper would you give that?
I stop eating at jalapeno, so I'll put it at jalapeno.
Jalapeno? Okay. So I guess that's take number 3. I'll give it to you to close this out. See if you could top that one.
I don't think I'm gonna top that one. I've been thinking a lot because, like so many of us, I think so much of our opinion on how we live our life is based on our lived experience. And I've just been cycling through a few. I've got a lot that are Chicago related, and so I guess I'll just close with a Chicago related one, which is the Loop, which is Chicago's downtown. The Loop should be entirely closed off to cars, with the exception of those with a handicap tag. The Chicago Loop is probably the best served in terms of transit area in the city, or maybe the entire Midwest. It might be the easiest place to get to for any resident of Cook County, the city of Chicago, or even the much broader suburbs. There's a commuter train that runs all the way to South Bend, Indiana. And the Loop has been facing some hardships as of late. The COVID really changed commuting patterns. There are less people in there. The downtown Loop was already very 9-to-5 focused before COVID. After COVID, let's assume that a lot of businesses are now 3 days in, 2 days home. So on any given day, let's assume there's about 60% of the 2019 population downtown. But we know it's far, far lower on Fridays specifically. That's hard on the businesses, and they need to expand their hours. And I think a great way to do that would be closing down the streets entirely. You already have elevated and subway trains, keeping streets open for buses, and then certain handicap exceptions, I think could liven the area and make sure that people still have access. But I think Chicago is a big enough city where people aren't going to leave if they're forced to park farther away or hop a train. And I think it would really change the dynamic of that downtown area once the 9-to-5 day is over. There would be room in the streets for dining, festivals, people to enjoy themselves. And I think it would change the dynamic of the city. So I know this might not mean anything to someone living outside of Chicago, but it's essentially me proposing that the downtown of a major city completely close itself to cars. It's congestion pricing taken a step further.
I am going to give you my thoughts on this. I am very broadly familiar with the Loop. I know it's where the downtown is. I know it's where a lot of high rises, a core of the financial district of Chicago. But you're telling me how it's less congested and crowded and busy as it was 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. I just don't follow why that should be an argument to limit passengers even further. I would be almost more sympathetic if you're like, it's overflowing with people in traffic and people can't get where they need to go. And that's why we need to limit cars. But you're saying the opposite, that it was holding people at higher rates half a decade ago. Now it's slower. So now we should just, even though it's less busy and congested, we should limit it. I don't quite follow that line of logic.
For one, I think that this is one of those situations where the horseshoe model almost applies. You know, on either end of the spectrum, radical change is necessary. And whereas in New York City, congestion pricing is necessary because it was so clogged, the air was so bad that a simple $9 charge makes such a big difference in trip times for people, including public transit users. It's worth it. This is the flip side where the loop needs drastic change, including in its zoning. More people need to live there, period. That will lead to more people being there outside of the 9 to 5. But this is a downtown core that was designed for 2019, third largest city in America, financial district traffic, and it no longer has that, which means that its roads are drastically overbuilt for a population that is just no longer there. Cars, you can look at the loop outside of that early morning or afternoon rush hour. There aren't even that many cars on the streets. To me, this is an overcapacity problem that warrants drastic change. So, in my opinion, they should close the streets.
My counter would be like, okay, you could say we have too many lanes for not enough traffic. What would be wrong with turning one of the lanes into a pedestrian promenade, turning it into a bus lane, turning it into, I don't know, an HOV lane or a bike lane, separated, protected bike lane.
But why
why completely eliminate traffic rather than right size it?
Well, maybe I didn't explain myself well enough. I still envision buses. I mentioned handicapped vehicles, but buses being able to traverse, and then bike lanes as well. I fully support bike lanes. There's Chicago's bike share Divvy is great. It sees very high ridership in the downtown loop. And if you speed up the buses by eliminating traffic, the buses will run very fast. The buses are frequent downtown. They can help connect riders with the 4 different train stations in Chicago's downtown. These are commuter stations, which that's a mess on its own. But there is Union Station and then 3 additional places where trains terminate. And so if you can increase bus speeds, the distances from those train stations to people's offices will be lessened by speeding up buses or making a bus more appealing to take as part of the last mile journey. Or if you eliminate cars and the bike lanes and sidewalks are easier to navigate, more people might be willing to bike or walk, perhaps using bike share or micromobility. I just think that the opportunities there are they're pretty limitless, and I know that 9 to 5 is what we're talking about, but I want to imagine outside of the 9 to 5 too. This is an area that is really a ghost town outside of the 9 to 5. And if you can limit traffic, it creates all sorts of new opportunities that expand the scope of what's possible in a downtown. Because, this is one of the greatest cities in the world. It's a vibrant city, but the downtown is dead on the weekends or after 8 p.m. That's crazy. Changing the streetscape, making it easier for people to use different modes of transit in one of the richest areas of transportation in the country, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I guess for me, I would be fully on board if you're like, we have this very dense area that just isn't as busy as it once was and could use some benefits to faster buses and more bikes and better nightlife and restaurants and whatnot. And you're like, I think we should right size the amount of automobile infrastructure. I'd be right there with you if you said that. But I don't know if eliminating all traffic on this, I fear for the second order effects. Are you going to see future businesses, even as COVID goes far into the rear view mirror and maybe some more return to office comes to a new equilibrium or whatever it may be? Are these businesses not going to want to go downtown because of this? Would they rather go to Rosemont? Would they go to Schaumburg? Would they go to Indiana, like the Bears, in order to maintain access by car in a way that they won't be able to get downtown? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it is worth considering.
One recurring theme throughout our 4 hot takes is the prevalence of the suburbs as a secondary option. Should I leave the city for the suburbs? Will this make people want to move to the suburbs and flee the city? This is unrelated, but I think as we think about a future that is more urban oriented, where hopefully more people live in higher density areas, more people take public transportation, we need to do something about the suburbs. And I'm not saying eliminate them, but I am saying we need to drastically rethink the cost structure and what it costs to live, what the costs to life are, to make urban life more affordable and appealing compared to the suburbs. Because so long as someone says, oh, should I just go out to that hellscape where I could live off of a Strode and go to TJ Maxx and Chick-fil-A in my car every single day, as long as that is as appealing, if not more appealing from a financial perspective than living in the beautiful urban fabric of a city, we are screwed.
Even ignoring the financial perspective, I'd pay extra for that lifestyle. That sounds beautiful to me. Going to Chick-fil-A every day and going to the TJ Maxx and the Buc-ee's.
Okay, yeah, I didn't even mention. Whatever. Yeah, that's
right.
I think that's a good takeaway. Because this podcast was a little goofy in giving hot takes, and you talk about how right sizing is probably a better option for the Chicago Loop. You asked for a hot take, I gave you a hot take.
You gave me a hot take. I appreciate it, and I think today you're like, Owen wants to eliminate the suburbs, abolish the suburbs. He wants you to live in the 15-minute city. He wants the government to track your vehicles. I think
government already does track your vehicles. The flock cameras are everywhere. So
yeah, but they want to put GPS chips in your vehicles. I think you're building a great political future.
You're gonna have to scrub this from the internet.
Oh, jeez. But this was a really fun episode. I appreciate you playing along with my little bit unique premise. I hope the listeners found this interesting. In the comments below, give us your thoughts on how spicy each of the 4 takes were. Maybe do a tier list or a ranking, and give us some of your hot takes. If we see any fun hot takes in the comments, maybe we'll discuss them in the next episode. But anything else you want to end with, Owen?
No, just that I'm pleased. I didn't want to sound like Stephen A. I think that this was actually a pretty great discussion. So what could have been a really stupid hour, I think, was debate worthy of our great American cities.
That's fantastic. And I guess on that note, you have just touched the third rail. I guess both of us kind of did ourselves with some of these hot takes.
Preparing myself. I had my hand fully wrapped around it.
Yeah. But thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for our next episode and give us some of your takes in the comments. We'd love to hear that.
All right.